morning, this is Lisa Lee with BTV News. In global news, Taiwan's foreign exchange reserve has reached a total of $478.12 billion last month, in the seventh consecutive monthly record according to the data from the central bank. The new figure was more than $4 billion higher than the previous record in November, the bank has announced Monday on January 6, 2020. Officials have named the rise of the euro against the US dollar due to the income investments from foreign currency and the central bank's own investment in the market, according to the report by Liberty Times. For the whole of 2019, Taiwan's foreign reserves increased by $16.34 billion, which leads investors to speculate whether the island could overtake Saudi Arabia to rank number 4 on the global list of foreign exchange reserve holder, reported by United Daily News. Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam said Tuesday that the city faces multiple challenges in the new year, including violence, economic tribulation, and health scare as anti-government protests enter their 8th month. Pro-democracy demonstrators held banner and place cards during a rally at Causeway Bay in Hong Kong, Monday, January 6, 2020.
The government has decided to suspend the legislative amendment exercise. I feel deep sorrow and regret. The government will formally withdraw the bill.
Protests began in June to oppose a proposed extradition bill that would have allowed Hong Kong residents to be sent to stand trial in mainland China, where activists are routinely jailed. While demonstrations have continued around broader democratic demands. This is the demonstrators' slogan, "Meet all of our 5 demands and not one less," which includes number 1, full withdrawal of the extradition bill. Number 2, an independent commission of inquiry into alleged police brutality. Number 3, retracting the classification of protesters as rioters. Number 4, amnesty for arrested protesters. And number 5, dual universal suffrage, which means for both the Legislative Council and the Chief Executive. The latest news on U.S.-Iran tension occurred in the wake of the U.S. airstrike that killed Iran's top general Qasem Soleimani on January 3, 2020. The Pentagon is confirming that Iran has launched more than a dozen ballistic missiles at 2 targets hosting against the U.S. military and the coalition forces in Iraq. The Defense Department spokesman Jonathan Hoffman said, "It is clear that these missiles were launched from Iran." Hassan Salami made the pledge Tuesday in Central Square in Kerman that he vowed to mirror the demands of the top Iran officials for retaliation against America for a purposeful slaying that's drastically raised tension across the Middle East.
We do, absolutely. And something I think that you have to consider has been going on since basically 2003, since the invasion of Iraq. And when we talk about Qasem al-Soleimani, we're talking about someone who was at the forefront, really pushing the conflict that we saw there between 2003, 2011, the surge, of course, that took the lives of so many U.S. soldiers via IED, via ambush, by multiple attacks. And I think it's interesting to note, as you say, that Iraq has continued to be a battleground, not a Cold War, but in fact a hot war. A proxy, of course, for the continuing Iran versus American narrative, frankly. And, when I speak to Iraqi leaders in the past, they've told me again and again, they're really essentially between a rock and a hard place because, there's such a huge presence of Iran in the country. Businessmen in the country in Iraq are consistently doing business with their Iranian counterparts because they can't get Western backers because of the high security risks and because of sanctions and all these other issues. So Iran is a part of a daily life in Iraq. And I think it's something that the U.S. administration, particularly under Donald Trump, and especially when I speak to people like Mike Pompeo or Brian Hook, the U.S. Special Representative on Iran, it's not necessarily something that they're willing to accept in any way, that Iran is a continuing presence inside that country. But of course, that's what we see on a day-to-day level. And the fact of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, at the end of the day, the real worry, isn't it, is that something could happen in that part of the world. And then that really drives us into a more global problem than a U.S. problem. So I think that you have to take a step back. Think about the political calculus here. Think about what we've seen from President Trump in the past. He's willing to do these retaliatory measures. He's willing to say, there's a red line to cross that line would be to kill an American. We've seen a U.S. contractor killed. We've seen U.S. soldiers injured from these attacks earlier in the week. We've seen the U.S. embassy essentially, bombarded or attacked by these pro-Iranian militias.
The Trump administration has accused China's largest telecommunication company of intellectual property theft and illegal subsidies, which the U.S. officials have charged the company with violating U.S. sanctions on Iran and indicated it for stealing U.S. intellectual property.
The founder of Huawei, Ren Zhengfei, said the company will cut production by $30 billion over the next 2 years as the Trump ban starts to bite. Speaking on a panel at its headquarters in Shenzhen, he also said Huawei is expecting to see a 40% drop in smartphone sales outside of China this year. And according to Bloomberg, it's looking at abandoning the launch of its latest phone, the Honor 20, due for release in Europe on the 21st of June. Last year, Huawei overtook Apple to become the second biggest smartphone seller in the world after Samsung. Mr. Ren said he's predicting overall flat sales amounting to $100 billion in 2019 and 2020, but said Huawei should regain vitality in 2021. And it remains confident in its home market, China, saying domestic growth is, quote, very fast. Last month, the Chinese tech giant was blacklisted by the Washington administration in an escalation of the US-Sino trade war. This prompted many tech companies such as Alphabet, SoftBank and Arm to take a step back from Huawei. Google recently said it plans to deny Huawei access to its Android operating system. There have been broader concerns around the world recently about the use of Huawei products in the rollout of 5G mobile networks. This amid security concerns and fears of potential surveillance by the Chinese authorities. However, Huawei denies any link of this kind to the Chinese government.
Administration and its supporters argue they are in a bigger fight to address long-standing American complaints with China that will be the long-term benefits of U.S. businesses and workers. They point to a U.S. economy growing faster than its peers and continuing to generate plenty of jobs as vindication of its trade policies. The revised date on Friday is expected to confirm the U.S. economic growth of 2.1% annualized rate in the third quarter. In November, the economy created a better-than-expected 266,000 jobs, according to the report by Anna Swanson at New York Times.
US President Trump has been on a charm offensive in Osaka, and that even extended to the press. In a news conference that stretched 90 minutes, Trump said his most important meeting of the week had led to an agreement not to impose more tariffs and restart negotiations with China.
But we have, I guess, $350 billion left, which could be taxed or could be tariffed, and we're not doing that. We're going to work with China on where we left off to see if we can make a deal.
Trump confirmed that telecommunications giant Huawei will now be able to resume purchases of high-tech U.S. components.
And we sell to Huawei a tremendous amount of product that goes into the various things that they make. And I said that that's okay, that we will keep selling that product. These are American companies.
Details on the deal will follow, but Trump said that China had agreed to purchase agricultural goods while negotiations continue. Trump responded to a request from President Xi Jinping to pledge better access for visas for Chinese students. And in language not used in Washington recently, he called China a potential strategic partner.
I think we're going to be strategic partners. I think we can help each other. I think in the end we can have, if the right deal is structured, we can be great for each other. If China would open up, you're opening up a tremendous, the largest market in the world.